These are the 2026 Asus ProArt PX13 and Asus TUF A14. And while these two laptops have basically nothing in common with each other than that they're made by Asus of course, they do share a very similar chip design, the Ryzen Ai Max. So which one is more worth it, the 395 or the 392? Well, let's find out. And please like and subscribe if you like these type of videos. From the outside, these two laptops are both quite small. And while the A14 is technically larger, the difference really is minimal. Neither one of them is super gamer oriented and could be used in a regular professional setting. They both have a metal top and bottom, which makes them feel very sturdy. But the ProArt actually has a fully metal body all around, while the TUF has a plastic inside. So the PX13 has slightly better build quality. The ProArt is also a little bit thinner, which just looks more sleek. And it's also more lightweight. But in real world use, both of these can easily be used with one hand. Oh, and as a side note, the power button on the TUF is on a normal place up here, but on the ProArt it's on the side of the laptop. It's worth mentioning in case you really don't want that. But here come the similarities. They both have Ryzen Ai Max Plus processors. But the TUF A14 has a 392, while the ProArt PX13 has the 395. Well, the TUF's 392 is literally the same chip as the ProArt's 395, but with 4 less cores, which makes it quite a bit cheaper to produce. And most people aren't gonna need 16 CPU cores anyways. Another big difference between these two is that the TUF only goes up to 64 GB of memory, while the ProArt can go up to a whopping 128 GB. And this is shared memory for both of them, so you can choose yourself where that RAM gets allocated to, which allows for an iGPU with up to 96 GB on the ProArt and up to 56 GB on the TUF. So if you need a lot of VRAM for running big 3D modeling projects or even running local AIs, these two laptops are perfect. Now these two have a very similar port selection, but the TUF has an extra USB-A port. Also, the ProArt PX13 has 2 high-speed USB-C 4 Gen 3 ports, while the TUF A14 only has 1 USB-C 4 port. The other one is a slower 3.2. And in their spec sheets, it says that only the ProArt PX13 supports an external GPU from Asus, that XG Mobile, while the TUF does not. As for their chargers, they're the exact same size and the same 200 watts. And both of these laptops also support USB-C charging up to 100 watts, so other charging bricks are possible. Now let's look at their keyboards. These are actually very similar. They may have a different key font written on them, but the keys themselves they're identical. I mean, these are the same keyboard units. And they're both incredibly satisfying to type on, with enough key travel. And they're one of my favorite laptop keyboards. The TUF has these 4 extra macro keys at the top though, while the ProArt doesn't, which is a bummer. They also both have a single zone, single color backlight, but the TUF has a white one, while the ProArt has a light blue one. Moving down, we have their trackpads. They're both about as big, meaning pretty large for this size of laptop, and they're both made of glass. So they feel sturdy and smooth. And their clicks do feel nice. The ProArt feels a bit more premium, but I myself prefer the deeper and louder click on the TUF. But obviously, the ProArt has the added benefit of having a nipple. This is the ProArt dial, which is a touch-based rotary macro key, which you can assign some pretty handy functions to. It's got some pretty cool implementations in popular software like Premiere Pro, and can be genuinely handy for creators. Moving up, we have their displays, and by looking at their spec sheets, they both have a lot of pros and cons. The ProArt absolutely wins in terms of panel technology. I mean, an OLED has beautiful vibrant colors, infinite contrast, and the blacks are pitch black. While the TUF has some IPS bleeding in very dark rooms. And when you put them next to each other, it's not even close. But then the TUF has a way smoother display. 165Hz looks better in every single way, and the ProArt just feels a little choppy in comparison. Not just in games, but in regular use too. The ProArt is a little higher resolution and has higher pixel density, but at 14 and 13 inches, you just do not see the difference. These two are both very sharp panels. But when it comes to display coatings, yeah, the TUF easily wins here. I normally prefer a good anti-reflective layer over a matte coating, but the ProArt doesn't have either. It's just full glossy and an absolute mirror compared to the TUF. The ProArt does get a little brighter, but honestly, without a coating, I massively prefer the TUF for outside use or even when you're sitting near a window. Their hinges also differ a lot. The TUF can open up to 180 degrees, so flat, but the ProArt is a 2-in-1 laptop, so it can actually fully fold up to 360 degrees. And it also has a touchscreen, which means it could be used as a tablet and even comes with a stylus and has stylus support. But while they both can be opened up easily with one hand, these 360-degree hinges are always more floppy than the regular ones. So the TUF wobbles a lot less in actual use and doesn't flop around as much as the ProArt. It should be pretty clear by now that these two displays are made for two very different groups of people. But what about their speakers? These two both sounded very good in their individual reviews. But how do they compare to each other? Well, they both sound quite good. The ProArt sounds very clear, but is a little bit lacking in bass. But the TUF sounds a lot bigger than it is, and has that extra bass and treble. They both have their ups and downs, but overall, I think the TUF sounds a little better. Both the ProArt and TUF have pretty basic webcams, but the colors and contrast do look a little better on the ProArt. However, the microphone sounds way better on the TUF. It's almost studio level quality. Alright, let's get to the important stuff. Performance. The Ryzen 392 is literally just a cut down version of the Ryzen 395. So how much slower is it? Well, in Cinebench R23, single core wise, they're not that far off from each other. But the ProArt 395 absolutely crushes the 392 in multi-core performance. I mean, it sits up there with way bigger, way faster gaming laptops. But in 3D Mark TimeSpy, the TUF actually beats the ProArt. You might think this is within the margin of error, but we'll have to see in a little bit if it's actually faster. But that's all just synthetic benchmarks. How do these two compare in real-world performance? Well, the main advantage of these two laptops is that shared memory, which makes them excellent at VRAM-intensive tasks. For example, running local AI models. And since the ProArt has literally 4 times the memory of the TUF, it performs quite a bit better here. In both CPU and GPU-intensive models, the ProArt creates responses faster, and has the ability to run way heavier models, with more complex thinking. However, in some lighter models, the TUF A14 does just fine as well. But because the ProArt has more memory, it can just handle a lot more, like bigger 3D modeling projects, and like I said, bigger AI language models. But what about mixed CPU and GPU workloads? Well, gaming is a very intensive task on both of those, so let's see how these two compare in some actual games.
What did you do, man?
Okay, we saw some very interesting results. By the way, these two laptops do have different native resolutions, which is why I ran all the games in 1200p. Also, the difference between 1200p and 2.5 or 3K is basically nothing on these small screens. So it's better to just run them at a lower resolution and get higher frame rates. In most games, the TUF was actually a tiny bit faster, but 0 to 5% higher frame rates is basically nothing, and probably within the margin of error. But in Battlefield 6, the ProArt performed better by a mile, getting more than 30% higher average frame rates. Battlefield 6 is a pretty CPU-intensive game, and it really likes to suck back VRAM. So the slightly faster processor combined with a lot more memory on the ProArt means it runs quite a bit better on it. And because it has more cores, it'll also be better for non-gaming tasks, like multi-threaded workloads or bigger projects. But as for 99% of people, both of these are gonna handle anything you throw at them. But these are still two different laptop chassis, which means different cooling systems. So how do they compare in terms of thermals and fan noise? Well, very closely. The TUF A14's 392 reaches maximums of around 85 degrees, which is very good for a laptop processor. But the ProArt stays even cooler, reaching maximums of only 78 degrees Celsius, which is crazy. But how? Because the 395 has more cores than the 392, so shouldn't it be running hotter? Well, the 392 in this TUF A14 actually has a slightly higher TDP, which gives it the room to use 10 watts more. And during gaming, it does make use of that, which makes it slightly faster, but also run a little bit hotter in most games. Now, both of these laptops also have a manual mode, which means you can overclock the shit out of their processors and make them quite a bit faster, but that can also make them so hot that they start throttling themselves. So make sure to prop up your laptop if you want even higher performance. Now, these two chips use the exact same architecture, and they even share the same 73 watt-hour battery. So they should be getting the exact same battery life, right? Well, I tested their battery in two different scenarios, under light use and during gaming. In the light use test, I played a YouTube video until both their batteries died, with their displays at 80% brightness, at 60 Hz, and with their keyboard backlights turned off. And the ProArt lasted substantially longer than the TUF A14. Which definitely isn't right. The 392 is exactly the same as the 395, with it just missing 4 cores. And they have the same size battery. Well, this is likely a software or firmware issue with my TUF A14, which makes it use a little bit more power on battery. Asus is aware of this problem and they're currently working on a fix, so I'll let you guys know if anything changes. But once that has been fixed, these two should both be getting way over 10 hours of battery life. Now in the gaming test, I played Battlefield 1 until their batteries died, with the same settings as before. And again, the TUF lasted shorter, but we know it has issues now. It should last basically as long as the ProArt, which got almost 3 hours of battery life. This is longer than a Nintendo Switch 2 in most games, which makes it an awesome portable gaming device. The TUF should be one too, but maybe after the updates. Now, these two are both small, thin laptops, so do they have any space left for upgradeability? Well, one of them more than the other. They both have soldered RAM, unfortunately, since they need very fast shared memory, but the ProArt only has one M.2 SSD slot, which is exclusively for the tiny 2230 size, which are less available and more expensive. While the TUF A14 actually has 2 full-size M.2 slots. So you don't even need to reinstall Windows to get more storage. But they both still have Wi-Fi card slots, which could be handy in the future. But here's arguably the biggest difference between these two, their pricing. This TUF A14 model with 32 GB of RAM is around $2,000 to $2,200, which is on the expensive side. But this ProArt with 128 GB of RAM is a whole lot more expensive, at $3,000. And that is quite the difference. The ProArt does have cheaper models with less memory, but those are still pretty expensive. And the TUF A14 has models with a regular GPU as well, without the shared memory, and those are a whole lot less expensive. But these two high-spec models are pretty up there. Which brings us to our conclusion. Which one of these is more worth it? The ProArt PX13 or the TUF A14? Well, it really depends on your needs. These are both very well built, powerful little laptops. I mean, the amount of power for such a portable package really is unique in the laptop sector. But the TUF is made more for gaming, while the ProArt is more for creative work. They do both have that shared memory, which makes them able to do crazy VRAM intensive workloads, like run local AI models or model big 3D projects. But with the ProArt going up to 128 GB of shared memory, it can do all of that stuff on a whole nother level. Now the OLED display on the ProArt is pretty, but the fact that it's only 60 Hz and that it's as glossy as a mirror kind of turns me off. Eventually, it all comes down to how much money you want to spend. Look, these are both not really cheap laptops, but if you need a lot of memory, 4 times more RAM for only $800 more is a pretty good deal for as far as the word deal goes. In the end, these are two laptops for two very specific niche markets. So for you, they probably seem overpriced. But with the unique things that a powerful processor mixed with shared memory can do, they do have a target group. For most people, I would just recommend buying a TUF A14 with a regular GPU. I mean, it's a whole lot cheaper and it performs almost the same in games, and it's every bit as good from the outside as this model. But as for which one of these is better, I'll let you guys decide that. Now let me give a huge shout out to my YouTube members. Soundwife, Thomas, Inky, Mr. Frosty Dude, Dropzone1, Martijn Snijkers, Flimsy, Aki, Mr. Nuke, Sebastian, Christian Sands, Real Elf, Eric the Red, Wesley Rhodes, Ghost Data, Walter, Anugadar, Abdullah, Lewis, and Ethan. If you become a YouTube member, you get early access to content of mine, a shout out at the end of every video, and you'll also be supporting me as a creator to make these videos. And of course, you'll also be part of the Cool Guys Club, so you can use cool emojis like these in the comment section. So join the club if you're interested, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye bye.
You got blood on your face, that's really suspicious. Are you evil?